So today we're going to talk about probiotics. Like, how many strains does the body actually have? Which ones are the best or most practical? And how do we know which probiotics are best for the person? And is it best to switch strains, and some practical applications, and how to use probiotics for the most effectiveness? So today I'm joined with Katrine. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wade.
So there's so much information, and we talk a lot about this in the digestive series, but everybody's kind of getting into the probiotics game and understanding that we need them. I mean, let's start, like, how many strains do we actually have in our body? There seems to be a lot of variance from what people are saying.
Well, it's a continued research, and
Right.
we just started scratching the surface on what probiotics are, how many bacteria we have in our bodies. That so far, what we know is we probably have 400 or more strains that we have been able to identify and study, and some of them are beneficial, obviously, the probiotics, and some of the strains are not that great. About 85 of your microbiome, or the collective gut flora and the flora that lives on your skin and in your mouth, is supposed to be the good ones, the pro-life, and about 15% is the bad ones. That's the balance.
That's a pretty amazing statistic, considering we've been so antibacterial. Yet you're saying that 85% of what they estimate is actually good for us?
Well, yeah, that was supposed to be. That's the balance. We want to keep the balance on the good scale. Most of them having a beneficial health effect for us. So things like digesting making minerals more available, digesting foods, protecting the body from pathogens, things like that. In reality, for most people nowadays, with all the digestive issues and antibiotic use and use of things that kill the good flora, like chloride and fluoride in your water, or overuse of antibacterial soaps and agents. In reality, this balance had tipped for most of the people, and that's why they have digestive problems, and which lead more into chronic disease and cancer and things like that. So as far as we know, there is a whole bunch of these great guys down there, in our guts, that are able to help us out. And some of the species were more studied than others. Lactobacillus is one of the species that was really widely studied.
So it's like you see it in almost everything, right?
Yeah, it's something that we find in big numbers in probiotic foods. It's one of the most popular probiotic supplements, and it's a large species, like a category of good flora that is producing lactase, basically, lactic acid. It also digests milk for us and produces lactase enzyme, and it tends to keep the pH of our digestive tract in balance, making it more acidic and preventing parasitic infections, making minerals more available, like copper, magnesium, trace minerals. And in general, it's a quite well-studied class of species.
And now, when we would see that on a label, that would be put as an L dot whatever the species is, right?
L plantarum,
right,
yeah.
So, exactly. So for you watching out there, if it has an L, it's a lactobacillus species, and then it will say what class it is, or like L plantarum, and then like the OM stream or whatever that happens to be. So.
We also have another class that has been quite widely studied. It's called Bifidobacteria, and that one would be B.
That's like B dot.
Infantis, B dot. Langum,
right.
That's a big class as well. Bifidobacteria has been shown to decline with age naturally, and of course, if you already have a whole bunch of practices in place that kill off bad bacteria, you're also at risk of losing them. Like antibiotics and antibacterial soaps and things like that. Bifidobacteria is lining our large intestine, and it produces a lot of energy for the cells in your large intestine lining, so it keeps it healthy, makes sure that your intestinal wall is not porous and it doesn't.
And we turn over the intestinal wall very, very quickly,
very
and that's an essential component for long-term health, right?
For long-term health. Also, Bifidobacteria plays a big part in the immune system, and protecting us from parasites, viral infections, communicating with the body about different antigens. It also produces vitamin K and a whole bunch of B vitamins, especially.
Which are some of the nutritional vitamins that people seem to be deficient most. And do you believe that's related because they don't have the right bacteria to absorb what they're taking?
Well, it's both. A lot of people don't get enough right foods into their diets, and they don't also have the good bacteria to be able to digest it.
So they literally got two strikes against them when it comes to adding to
And
this.
there's another one, enzymes. A lot of people don't have
Right.
the enzymes to be able to break down the food. So
Right, so you need enzymes, you need the probiotics.
and you need the right food.
And you need the right food in combination if you want to get maximize
Right.
to your health and your vitality and, of course, immune system function. And the bacteria are a critical role here, or in this case, probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
So we use those, we interject both of them.
Right. So bifidobacteria is also quite widespread in infants. That's like one of the first large classes that are usually found in intestinal wall in infants. So it's a quite well studied group of bacteria, and it's commonly found in a supplemental form.
So how do we know which one might be best for a person that we're saying, hey, they're going to the store, they're going online, they're like, I need to get a probiotic. I understand this. Maybe they watch some of this series and said, okay, where do I go and how do I select what's right for me?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't think we really have all the answers to that because we continually have to study the bacteria. We just really started scratching the surface about all the different types of bacteria available in strains. You definitely want to be looking for some of the super strains that maybe we already established research on. But what we know that there is something called gene fluidity between a lot of different types of bacteria, meaning they continuously changing DNA. You're actually not human. You have more DNA that is bacterial, 100 times more the DNA that is bacterial than actually human DNA.
Yeah, it's kind of a radical concept to think of, that there's actually more bacteria inside your body than there are cells in the body by like 10 times.
Yeah.
So
they're tiny, they're smaller than your cells, but you have a lot of them. And actually it's been looked at how many pounds of bacteria you have, about 4 pounds in your gut, 3 to 4 pounds. So it's a lot of bacterial species, and there's a lot of them there, and we're just starting to research, so we really don't have all the answers to that. We do have some research available around the main classes of species that we just talked about.
Right.
The other one we didn't talk about is called the soil-based organisms.
Right.
And soil-based organism is basically a spore organism that we would get from our soil. And we would get, they're more transient. They're not supposed to be establishing colonies in our digestive tract, so they kind of come in and out. The problem is with soil-based organisms, we used to get them from food because our farmer to table chain was very short. You used to get it in the dirt, and that's what the little kids do too. They are more acclimatized to pick up the
you see
microbiota.
kids eating dirt all the time,
They're supposed to crawl, and they're supposed to touch and taste and acclimatize themselves to the environments through having those spore-based organisms colonizing their digestive tract. Spore-based organisms are more stable too. They're more heat resistant, moisture resistant. Those are the kind of organisms that you will find in a store shelf, let's say in a supplement that is not requiring refrigeration. So we are definitely seeing a lack of these organisms in the human body. The problem is, for some people that would want to go out and consume that, because a lot of us growing up were so sterilized. We were not exposed to, as kids, to soil-based organisms. When we introduce those soil-based organisms in large quantities through a supplement form, it can make some people sicker because soil-based organisms can take over your
your whole track and throw off that, throw off those ratios.
You already don't have the species that's supposed to be there anyway, let's say, because we are not well, and they haven't established themselves. And when we throw a whole bunch of spoil-based organisms on top of that, because they're spore-based, they kind of take over and can become pathogenic. So actually, we've seen that small children and infants and toddlers, they're more, they benefit more from having soil-based organisms in supplemental form or through eating dirt.
Right. So really,
but for some adults, it might be an issue. So you have to be watching if you're out there and you're buying something in a store that has soil-based organism in it, and you find yourself having reactions or getting sicker. That's something you might want to be take out of your supplemental protocol and go back to more studied strains,
Right.
lactobacillus and bifido. The other thing to take a note of, the lactobacillus species like acidophilus, that's been said that you can take it in any amounts and it's great for you. It's also been shown for some people to pose problems. The lactobacillus can produce L-lactic acid
Yep.
and D-lactic acid.
Yep.
So the D-lactic acid is kind of harder to digest. So for people who already have serious digestive issues like Crohn's or let's say irritable bowel syndrome or things like that, that might pose more problems
Right.
because it will be harder for them to digest and it will switch the metabolism from in bacterial metabolism from anaerobic to aerobic.
Right.
So and it will reduce the ATP production, energy production. So that's something you might want to be paying attention to. So if you already have those digestive issues in place, you might want to stay away from large doses of acidophilus.
Right.
The L planetarium has shown, it's probably one of my favorite strains because it's shown to have an immense effect on our immune system, protect us from a whole bunch of viral issues, and some of the more stable strains too. And I know Pitrion, which is one of my favorite probiotics that your company produced, and I've been using it for over a decade. That's a more stronger, more
Very aggressive
viral,
strain.
very aggressive strain. And it's a superbug that, super strain, not superbug, super strain that we might want to be consuming. So those are the type of things you might want to take into consideration when you're looking for probiotic. But really, we still have to learn about how to really hack the microbiome, like how to really use the probiotics to our benefit. And there's also always a question, is it probiotics first or prebiotics? Which one comes first?
Yeah, to clarify the difference between a probiotic and a prebiotic. A probiotic is the actual organism that's doing its business, in your body.
Like
And a prebiotic would be the food that supports the growth of that colony.
Right. So for me, I think prebiotic is where you should be starting. You should be really addressing your diet and creating an environment for those good bacteria to grow and colonize and establish good, strong colonies.
Right. So let's just talk about that for just a second. So probably starting out is, getting your diet in order, and we'll get into that in a second. Maybe starting out with an aggressive strain like the P3OM, something like that, and then as you get more sophisticated down the road and you start relieving maybe some of the symptoms that you've had with digestive orders, maybe trying some of the other strains to experiment. That's kind of the route we've gone, or a lot of the people in the industry in the know. And then ultimately, maybe at the very back end or at the highest level, to maybe start playing around with some of the spore stuff. And then, of course, having the diet that supports that. You want to talk about that?
And for some people, the soil-based organisms are quite useful.
Right.
So it depends really on the condition and if they were exposed to dirt as a child. So if you grew up with your parents gardening and that you've been exposed to eating out of the garden or playing with mud pies, so you might be able to handle it really well and might be actually a solution to a lot of problems, right? And as far as the prebiotic food goes, the more diversity of foods and the more diversity in prebiotic strains, there's going to be more diversity in your probiotics too.
Right.
So for
what are some prebiotic foods?
Like artichokes, prebiotic foods, chicory roots,
chicory root,
fructoolisaccharides. So
that's called. You can't say that. It's called FOS.
FOS. Yeah. So those are some of them, and vegetables produce fiber that can be prebiotic foods, and fruits. Basically, vegetables and fruits. That's what
vegetables
you want to be doing.
and fruits, right? Adding those in.
And,
do you get the same effect if you're doing a green drink or something like that? Not the same?
It's not the same effect. It doesn't always produce the
same amount of fiber.
Yeah,
right?
it's usually if you're having a green drink that's devoid of fiber, you're getting more minerals and vitamins available in water, which can be easily for body to absorb. But you're
not feeding the bacteria.
Yeah, usually you're not feeding the bacteria. You really want that
important.
fiber.
Feed your bacteria.
Yeah, feed bacteria, right?
Or feed your probiotics. Excuse me.
And as far as how to start out for most people that might be wanting to correct an issue, It's suggested to, for 6 months or so, at least for 6 months, use therapeutic doses of the right probiotics for them.
So tell me what a therapeutic dose is in your world, because I know I'm really on the high end. Like I took a large amount of probiotics when I started to heal my own digestive issues. What have you seen in clinical experience?
Well, it depends on the person and what they're going to be able to handle, honestly. And how many probiotic cultures, not probiotic, how many units, active units are in a probiotic, right? So we usually talk billions, active cultures too. And we've spoken some videos, other videos, how to choose the probiotic. But it's really important to see how active the culture is and if it was stored properly and what was the count at the time of the manufacturing. And knowing that in 60 days you start losing the count, and you might actually end up with only 50% of what was, if the bacteria is, especially if it's not stable and it has to be refrigerated and it has to be kept in dark places. Some of the most stable probiotics like P3 you will have a higher count even
later on. Plus a very rapid doubling rate. I mean that doubles in the body every 20 minutes.
Exactly.
Which another strain might take. This is one of the things that one of my pet peeves is they don't share with you how fast that organism can colonize or grow, which can be hours or days as opposed to 20 minutes in a super strain.
Right. Remind me, how many billions of SFU in?
I think it's like 2.5 billion or whatever, and then that's at the time of manufacture, and at a year later, it's about half of that. So for people out there wondering about the question, because it's a topic that a lot of people don't know, and there's different labeling laws in different countries.
So for therapeutic doses, I like having at least 10 billion per serving, and it could be again different strains. You want to check what are the actual predominant strains in the supplement, and also go by the kind of the rules that we just talked about of which ones you would want to choose. You might want to avoid high levels of acidophilus if you already have problems with the digestive tract.
And also now, do you prefer to take that on an empty stomach before food, in the morning, at night? What's your
personal preference, and what I've seen in practice and what other experts suggest is doing it before bed. Last thing before bed. You don't want to be eating anything after that. You don't really want to be drinking water. Some of the experts say to open up a capsule and swish it around your mouth, because it can also help you with the flora in your mouth and in your nasal cavities, and then swallow it, and that's it. You're not having anything else after that. Usually on empty stomach, because you don't want those probiotics to be degraded by your hyaluronic acid or mixed with food and things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that was really, really helpful. I appreciate you taking time to share with us some integration. So for those who are out there, you can check back with the website, some more information about some of the different types of probiotics, as well as how to use them for maximum effect.